Hi, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to start talking about fleet management. When we think about fleet management, you're probably just going to be responsible for a particular cost center related to fleet management, especially if you work at a governmental organization such as a county or regional government or city government. But it's important to keep several things in mind. Of course, you're going to have to work with other departments quite often if you don't have complete responsibility. So we'll talk about some of those aspects this week as we go through our content on fleet management. In particular, you need to always keep in mind that you're thinking about and working for two customers. You're working both for the patients that you take care of and have responsibility for, as well as the operators of those vehicles. Often costs are perceived as high, and often purchases are put on the back burner for capital expenses such as new vehicles. So fleet quite often takes kind of a back seat. What we want to talk about partly this week is how to change that to some extent and how to actually create a system such that fleet becomes an important aspect of the overall management of your organization. Finally, we want to look at the impact of fleet management in terms of operations and how there's certain things you can do that can actually improve those operations over time. If you think about an enterprise-wide fleet management system, it's very comprehensive. There's a lot of moving components. Here you can see a representation of some of those moving components, everything from analysis of miles per gallon or operational miles for vehicles to the cost per mile for a given vehicle. So there's things such as management analysis, cost analysis, service level agreements, billing and collections in terms of actually billing for services that you may provide, but as well as actually paying bills for particular fleet maintenance repairs that you may require for your system. And then of course there's sourcing and purchasing issues such as those we talked about last week when we talked about materials management. So I want you to keep all of those things in mind as we move through the content this week. We'll try to cover some of the high points of the things as an administrator you would need to think about. In particular, we want to think about these objectives. We want to think about the reliability of the fleet that you have, the suitability of the fleet, the availability of the fleet, in other words, making sure that the vehicles aren't breaking down, the safety of the fleet, of the vehicles you utilize, the economical aspects of the fleet and how economical it is to operate that given fleet, and the eco-friendliness of a given fleet. Important questions you'll need to ask are, do we have the correct type and number of vehicles? Is the number increasing or decreasing over time? How reliable is our fleet? Do we have critical vehicle failures? Do we have unscheduled maintenance repairs that are exceeding what's expected? Now, both of those, just to point out, are really expected practices. They're things that most EMS services actually evaluate in some way on a continuous basis. And we'll actually look at a control chart later of a way that you can actually present this information. Do you have a driver training and safety program? And are those things integrated? And not only driver training and safety, but not only operation of the vehicle, but also important aspects of how to actually maintain a vehicle is important. We actually have an article this week related to that. Do your ambulances comply with the KKK standards and other standards that might be in place? Certain states have very specific standards. I remember one time in particular when we had the opportunity to acquire a used vehicle from the military that had been utilized as an ambulance in the military. And we were going to utilize it, and this was actually here in the state of North Carolina. And unfortunately, the vehicle, the distance between the deck or the entrance to the back of the ambulance and the ground was such that it didn't qualify, it didn't meet the North Carolina standards for operations, so we could not utilize that as an aimless in the state of North Carolina. Now, in this situation, we were planning to use it only in special situations anyway, but regardless, it could not be certified as an aimless in the state of North Carolina. What does our fleet cost? What does it cost to operate the fleet? How can we improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our fleet? And how does all of this relate to our customers? So when we think about doing this, one of the ways that it can be approached is to think about creating specific guidelines for how you do these things. In particular, you may want to create policies or requirements, provisions that will outline how certain things are done. For example, preventive or scheduled maintenance. Strategy. You want to include it as part of your strategy. Of course, the fleet compromises a large portion of the capital expenditures for an EMS organization. So you will need to make sure that you include that as part of your planning process. Daily management. What will be expected of your operational supervisors as part of the daily management of maintaining that fleet. Not only the supervisors, but also the individual employees. What do you expect from each employee in regards to managing the fleet? Information, what kind of things will you want to collect? You'll need to give some thought to that. Operations, how will you buy, maintain, and sell vehicles when the need arises to do such? If you have a small fleet, that may not be an issue. If you have a larger fleet, 10 or 15 vehicles or more, you can see that would be a pretty hefty job to actually figure out where you're going to sell used scrap vehicles and try to get something out of them in terms of a financial return that can help offset the cost of the new fleet that you're going to have to figure out where to purchase and look at specifications, etc., that we'll talk about. Administration, of course, in terms of registering the vehicles, ensuring that they're operational, ensuring that all the licensure requirements have been made, and then accounting in terms of all the cost aspects of fleet. Again, it being a very big capital expenditure. So we'll stop there for this lecture, and we'll pick up in the next lecture talking about types of vehicles.